Why does sugar cost twice as much in America as it does anywhere else in the world? And why is the price of beef so high? The answer to these questions are the same, and it's going to make you angry because the story of American food isn't just about sugar or beef or even farming. It's about who gets to profit from the system and who ends up paying the price. Let's talk about the politics of food.
But also on the rise, your grocery bill.
Consumers grappling with rising beef prices.
Tariffs on foreign countries is one reason.
The price of tomatoes is going up faster than any other food group.
Highest beef prices we've ever seen.
That your trip to the supermarket is costing more.
Imagine you're a farmer and you need new equipment, a tractor and a harvester. So you take out a loan for $800,000 and go to John Deere and buy them. So far, so good. But one day something breaks. Now, on your old tractor, you would just pick up a wrench and figure things out. But now you can't. Your tractor just beeps at you and tells you to call a John Deere authorized mechanic at $150 an hour. But there's another thing that's wrong. There's a 2-week wait for him to come out to your farm, and to make matters worse, you are directly in the middle of harvest season. That is what happened to at least 200,000 American farmers who sued John Deere in 2022. The case was just settled last month, and farmers got nearly $100 million. But as it turns out, that compensation was less than $1 an acre. John Deere agreed to make diagnostic tools available to farmers as part of that settlement, but only for 10 years. After that, John Deere can lock it back down unless there is some legislation in place that makes right to repair permanent law as it should be. See, John Deere isn't just a basic mechanical tractor anymore. John Deere has built one of the most sophisticated agricultural technology ecosystems in the world. John Deere's AutoTrack uses a combination of GPS, lasers, infrared sensors, and cameras to efficiently steer machinery without the need for a farmer to control it. It's like a product from Ron Popeil. Farmers just
set it and forget it.
To use AutoTrack, John Deere charges farmers $750 for basic access, but it can cost more than $1,800 to access any technology that uses GPS technology like AutoTrack does. GPS technology is at the center of John Deere's entire agricultural precision technology. But GPS was built by the United States Department of Defense using $12 billion of your tax dollars to create it. And $2 billion of your tax dollars is spent every year to maintain it. Yet John Deere is charging farmers a premium for something your tax dollars developed and currently maintain. There's a pattern here. The American government invests billions of taxpayer dollars for the genuine good of the country, but private companies continue to profit off public systems that your taxes help create and currently maintain. Why in the world is John Deere able to profit off a system that was built with taxpayer money and uses taxpayer money to maintain it? Now, I know many Americans, including myself, are upset with farmers since so many of them are complaining about the current economic conditions, even though they are the ones that voted for the policies that are harming them right now. But for now, let's put that aside for this video. Most people agree that John Deere should be able to profit off their hardware that they design and manufacture. But John Deere is taking advantage of farmers, and by extension, they are taking advantage of you by forcing farmers to pay them huge subscription fees, and those costs are passed on to distributors who pass them to grocery stores, who pass those costs on to you. John Deere has received 110 grants since 2012. 108 of them were given by state and local governments. They amounted to $238,290,795. There are other subsidies that aren't tracked on this list. States like Iowa, Illinois, and North Carolina provide funding for specialized training centers. This means that taxpayers like you and me often pick up the cost for training skilled workers that John Deere needs to manufacture their equipment. Yet they nickel and dime farmers at every chance they get, and these costs get passed on to every consumer in the country. I've got a lot more to say about John Deere, but if you're getting sick about hearing about them, you can use the chapter buttons below to move on to the next topic. Now, other than GPS subscriptions, farmers use other advanced technology solutions to make your food and the environment safer. See and Spray is a laser and camera precision spraying system. It uses cameras to scan and identify weeds, which trigger individual spray nozzles, which means only the weed is sprayed, leaving the rest of the crop completely untouched by pesticides. Without this technology, farmers would have to spray their entire crop, meaning all of the food you eat would be sprayed with pesticides. The system reduces the use of pesticides by nearly 50%, but John Deere charges up to $5 per acre. That adds up once you realize that the average farm is over 450 acres. Even the new self-repair tool that John Deere was forced to create as a result of the lawsuit costs $195 per machine per year. And that's just 2 of the subscriptions the average farmer is forced to purchase. In reality, a farmer that has 450 acres is looking at about $12,000 in subscription fees every year. Once you tack on the annual $97,000 it costs to finance these machines, a farmer with 450 acres is paying $109,000 per year just in equipment, financing, and subscription costs. That's before fuel, seed, fertilizer, or labor, and all of those costs get passed on to you. John Deere made $7 billion in profit in 2024, but still nickel and dime farmers every chance they get. Now, John Deere didn't invent GPS. The government did with your taxpayer money. John Deere didn't even create the open source machine learning libraries that power its See and Spray system. The global open source community created these basic libraries and gave them away for free. John Deere took all of that free software, wrapped their proprietary software around it, and is now charging hefty, never-ending subscription fees in order for farmers to use this technology. There has to be a better way for farmers to use this technology, right? Yeah, there are. But the problem is that farmers can't implement them legally. Let me explain. The Open Weed Locator is an open-source AI weed detection system that runs on a $100 Raspberry Pi, which basically is a tiny, low-cost computer. It does what the John Deere See and Spray system does, but for a fraction of the cost, with no subscription fee. Comma.ai built an open-source self-driving system. It was first created for regular cars, but AG OpenGPS has modified it so it can be used for farming equipment. It can do what John Deere charges thousands of dollars per year to access on a tractor.
It's magic.
So cheaper solutions do exist. These solutions were built by a community of people who shared it freely with the world. No subscription, no gatekeeping, and no profit motive. You may call that a socialist idea. I'd call it common sense. But right now, if a farmer tries to connect their John Deere hardware to these open source solutions, it would be illegal, and John Deere would sue the farmer out of existence for manipulating the hardware, even though farmers own their tractors, harvesters, and other equipment. What we need is legislation that allows farmers to connect their hardware to free or cheap open source alternatives. That would help them save money, and in turn, help you save money when you go to the grocery store. When politicians or even YouTubers like myself promote democratic socialism, we do it because we think we can make the United States a better place to live, and this is a type of legislation that we're talking about. We're not talking about nationalizing John Deere. We're not talking about eliminating their ability to profit. We simply want to make the system fair and let farmers use alternate software solutions on the hardware they already own without it being illegal to do so. If you think the price of our food is based on pure capitalism, you couldn't be more wrong. Every time you buy a box of cereal, a bag of candy, soda, a jar of barbecue sauce, anything that contains sugar, you are paying a hidden tax, a tax that goes directly to sugar producers. Why? Well, the US government controls the sugar market through 3 different mechanisms. First, it sets a quota on how much sugar each American producer can sell. Essentially, this divides up the market like a cartel. Secondly, it sets tariffs on imported sugar so high that foreign producers are effectively blocked from the American market. Third, it offers government loans to American sugar producers at below market interest rates, which ends up functioning as a price guarantee. The first two methods are very easy to understand, but let me break down the third mechanism because that's a little harder to understand. Imagine you're a sugar company and it's about to be harvest season. Sometimes a sugar crop could be infested with disease or suffer from wildfire, leading to a smaller yield, increasing the market price of sugar. That's just basic supply and demand. The less sugar that's available on the market, the more that it will cost. Sometimes a sugar crop can be so plentiful, it can yield higher than expected crops. That would lead to a surplus, which would decrease the market price of sugar. So instead of sugar producers selling at a low price and decreasing their profits, the sugar producer gets a loan from the USDA. The USDA takes their sugar crop, which has yet to be harvested, as collateral. When it comes time for these producers to sell their sugar that they've harvested, they look at the market price. If the market price is enough to make a good profit, well, they sell their sugar at the market rate to their buyers and they pay the USD loan back, which was very cheap to begin with, and then they pocket the profit. But here is where it gets interesting. If the price stays low, lower than the sugar producer needs to make a good profit, the producer won't pay back the loan at all. They'll just hand the sugar over to the USDA and walk away with no loss and no penalty. Their sugar harvest pays off the loan. This means that the federal government has guaranteed that sugar producers will never have to sell their product at a low price, ever. There is always a floor, always a minimum, and because of that floor, you always pay more. The total cost to American consumers and businesses has been estimated to be as high as $4.5 billion per year.
I'd like a bar of chocolate, please.
This doesn't fund roads or schools or hospitals. This was done to protect the profit margins of sugar producers, and you pay the price. The two biggest beneficiaries are the Fangel family and the U.S. Sugar Corporation. The Fangel family owns Domino Sugar, Florida Crystals, C&H Sugar, and American Sugar Refining. They are the world's largest cane sugar refiner with an estimated revenue of $5.75 billion. They collect an estimated $65 million in taxpayer-funded sugar subsidies annually, and they just spent $4 million lobbying Congress in 2024 to make sure the program never gets touched, paying both Republicans and Democrats. This type of deal isn't limited to just sugar. The same thing happens to corn, wheat, cotton, and even peanuts. This isn't capitalism. It's government-engineered oligopoly designed to keep prices high to protect a small number of incredibly wealthy producers. So if you think our food prices are based purely on the free market, think again. It's not. These are the type of wasteful programs that democratic socialists want to get rid of. They do not help the average American. While it was originally sold to the public as a program to help poor American farmers, the reality is that the biggest beneficiaries are wealthy billionaires and millionaires. Now, let's talk about beef, because you have undoubtedly noticed that beef is incredibly expensive right now. There are multiple reasons for this. The first cause is a severe 7-year drought across the American Midwest. The second is because of Trump-imposed tariffs on foreign beef imports and animal feed. Because of the combination of the drought and the tariff-related extra animal feed costs, cattle ranchers decided to send higher numbers of bulls and heifers to the slaughterhouse earlier than they would have. And that's the third reason. Usually these ranchers would have kept their cattle for a little longer, specifically for breeding purposes, but they decided to get rid of their cattle because the cost to feed and care for them went up so high. But the fourth reason is rarely discussed. It's consolidation. Just 4 companies control 85% of beef processing in America, and they have also controlled the pricing, illegally, I might add. When you go to the store, you might see 50 different beef brands with different logos and different taglines, but the reality is that they're all the same 4 companies: Tyson, JBS, Cargill, and National Beef. Now, I talked about JBS in one of my previous videos, which I'll link to at the end of this video, and I'll put in the description below, so check that out if you're curious. In 1970, American cattle ranchers received 70 cents of every dollar spent on beef. Today, ranchers receive about 37 cents. That difference didn't go to consumers in the form of lower prices. It went straight to the 4 companies in the middle of the supply chain. A rancher at a USDA roundtable asked this question. He said, "I sold my cattle and I lost $150 a head. The beef processor I sold it to made $1,800 a head. How can that be? How can that be? Corporate consolidation. When there are only 4 buyers for your cattle, you take what they can offer, or you're not able to get rid of your cattle." These companies are huge, and they pretend that their size actually makes things cheaper for the American consumer, so they love to talk about efficiencies of scale, but these massive, centralized plants are actually a disaster waiting to happen. When a fire or disease breaks out at one massive Tyson plant, which may process 5% of the nation's beef, the whole system breaks down. These 4 large companies then use that panic to justify increasing prices to every grocery store while telling ranchers, "Sorry, we can't pay you that much right now." Plus, the Big 4 have actually settled massive lawsuits over price fixing. Tyson Foods and Cargill have already agreed to pay a combined $87.5 million to settle a federal lawsuit brought by consumers who accuse the companies of conspiring to inflate U.S. beef prices by restricting supply. They call it a settlement to avoid admitting guilt, but to them, it's just the cost of doing business. That $87.5 settlement was in 2025, but JBS paid $52.5 million to grocery stores and distributors in 2022. And it wasn't just beef. Similar settlements were made for pork and chicken. The consolidation of meat processing companies has been a problem for decades, but when you tack on the drought and the high feed costs due to Trump's tariffs, it has led to the lowest amount of cattle available since 1951. But remember how I mentioned that a rancher said he lost money on cattle, but the beef processor made money? Well, the Big 4 beef processors manipulate the price of cattle by controlling the grading technology. If a rancher delivers cattle that are technically high quality, the Big 4's own grading system can make up reasons to downgrade the meat. For example, they'll say the marbling isn't quite right. The Big 4 beef processors will pay ranchers for the beef and tell them it's poor quality just to lower their purchase costs. But when they sell that beef to distributors, they will label it as premium choice. In February 2024, the USDA reached a settlement with Cargill after an investigation that revealed Cargill's beef grading cameras were, quote, installed incorrectly, unquote, at 4 of their beef processing plants, resulting in inaccurate grades applied to 324,824 individual beef carcasses. The result? Cargill underpaid cattle ranchers by over $12.5 million. But the fine that Cargill paid for underpaying those ranchers? Just $155,000. And if all that wasn't enough, we need to talk about how incredibly wasteful the American farming system truly is. Every year in the United States, 92 billion pounds of food goes to waste, yet 47 million Americans don't have enough food to eat. While families are choosing between groceries and rent, while children go to school hungry, 92 billion pounds of edible food go to landfills. There isn't one single reason for this, but here are the main drivers for this very wasteful system. Roughly 7% of all planted crops in America go unharvested, not because the food is bad, but because it doesn't look the way grocery stores want it to look. Meanwhile, when prices drop too low, like for corn, rice, and soybeans, and the market price can't cover the cost of harvesting,
farmers can no longer afford to harvest a field. At that point, it's cheaper to let it rot.
That's food someone could be eating instead of starving. In parts of the Mississippi Delta, producers who expanded their farms to grow rice last year are now stuck with an unprecedented surplus after prices plunged and export markets dried up, leaving their grain bins overflowing with unsold, rotting crops. During COVID, India limited exports so rice would stay cheap enough for their citizens to eat. But they have since lifted those export restrictions, and now the global market price of rice has dropped dramatically. Because there is not enough domestic demand to consume this surplus, and international buyers like China shifted to cheaper competitors like Brazil, India, and Thailand, many farmers are letting their grain spoil in storage. In Florida, the tomato market plummeted while the cost of farm labor skyrocketed. Farm labor is crucial for hand-picked crops like tomatoes, and Trump's mass deportation plan increased the cost of farm labor. At the same time, there just weren't enough farm workers to actually harvest the tomatoes, so farmers let the tomatoes rot. When you've built a system where you let 47 million people starve while you throw away 92 billion pounds of food, I think we can all agree that the system needs to change. There are some farmers that have increased their outreach for gleaning. Gleaning is the traditional practice of gathering leftover crops from agricultural fields after the initial harvest has been completed. Some farmers are letting the public come to their farms and take whatever they want with what is left over. That's a good start. But what we need is a national surplus food rescue program and make it mandatory for farmers to follow. This can include farmer compensation to help fund the harvest and distribution of those crops to food banks. Crops that would otherwise rot in fields or in storage bins. The food exists. The hungry people exist. The missing piece is the legislative policy. France passed a law in 2016 that mandated that large supermarkets must donate edible food. They face a fine of over $4,000 per infraction. California has a similar law like France does, but we need a national law that covers both grocery stores and farmers. Now, this video doesn't absolve Donald Trump from all the ways he's hurt the economy. His tariffs are costing the average American $2,000 a year. His war in Iran pushed gas to almost $5 a gallon, which makes everything more expensive, not just food. His mass deportation program left crops rotting in the fields because there was nobody left to harvest them. Trump's policies explain why your grocery bill is higher today than it was a year ago, but they don't explain why your grocery bill was already high before he ever took office. The Groundwork Collaborative found that in early 2024, corporate gouging drove 53% of price increases in the food sector, and that has been the story for the past 50 years. None of this is rocket science. It simply requires legislation, specific, targeted, enforceable legislation written by people who understand that the agricultural system of the wealthiest nation on earth should not be simultaneously bankrupting farmers and starving American families. Voting matters. Choose wisely. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, please hit that like button and consider subscribing. If you want to watch the video where I talked about JBS before, check out the video called Pay Me. It's well worth a watch. Thanks for watching.